All right. Well, welcome everybody to the January 2026 version of the Information Governance Community Roundtable. My name is Jesse Wilkins, and I'll be your lovely and talented facilitator for the next 55 and a half minutes. I am joined by Steve Weissman. Steve, would you like to introduce yourself real quick?
Hi, I'm Steve Weissman.
Do you
I
do
have
anything in the industry?
I have been known to. I am founder and CEO of the consulting firm Holly Group. Um, and it's all this stuff. It's how to get the most value you can from your information. Often we talk in terms of what to do with it, how to govern it. Today we're going to focus on why maybe to get rid of it and with a vengeance, because that's another way to improve its value is by getting rid of the devalued.
That's it. And normally we are joined by the third and awesome leg of our stool, Donda Young. She has been delayed and will be joining us presently, I hope. Um, I'm Jesse Wilkins, as I said, and my company's current name is Global Business Transformation Solutions. We're expecting to have our new name announced sometime next week. So, but like Steve, I've been doing this stuff a bit, and looking forward to the discussions. So today's discussion, hopefully we got your attention with this title about information style Swedish death cleaning. For those of you who are not familiar with it, um, this is kind of an interesting route to take to decluttering yourself, and we're going to contrast that with some other decluttering shortly. But the idea here is that um, you clean out your house, you declutter your house before you die so that your loved ones don't have to do it later, right? And I think all of us have been in that position where um, your parents or loved ones are getting older and they start giving you all their things. All the old Christmas ornaments, all of the old cookware, all of the 14 muffin tins that they've accumulated over the years. And so part of it is that this stuff could have been very well gotten rid of yeah, but it's more so that they don't have to burden their survivors with having to deal with it. Um, so Steve, do you want to talk about your take on this and how we came up with this title in the first place?
After we lost the bet, you mean?
Well,
Oh no, that has muffin tins. Good. I'm going to try to keep one eye on the chat. Also, just before we get rolling, um, we work very hard to make sure this is not just a few talking heads. So please do converse. Please do interrupt. Please feel free to turn your cameras on so we can see your smiling faces. This is the moral equivalent of getting together at the conference. Angela, you're just scaring me now. Um, yes, this is all about doing this so those who come after don't have to. Um, until we started talking about this, I was actually not familiar with the phrase Swedish death cleaning. And it turns out it's a thing there. I mean, a real thing, like it's part of the culture in Sweden. And that really captured me in terms of applying it to information. One of the biggest challenges we have is embedding this notion of properly taking care of our information and embedding it in our corporate and organizational cultures. So clearly that's not a thing you do overnight. I'm not quite sure where or how or when this took hold in Sweden, but it is a real thing. And besides being kind of a fun and catchy hook to a conversation like this, I think it's really important, as I know, I'll dare say all of you, but I certainly know a bunch of you that I've talked to about it, doing this for the children, doing this for the people who come after us so that the organization can continue to benefit from whatever cleanup strategies we deploy so they don't have to keep redoing it. Because I know plenty of the times that I get asked to come in and help an organization get their arms around information, I am met with, oh, here we go again. Didn't we already do this? Oh, so this trying to break this cycle of constant I was going to say ebb and flow, but flow and more flow of information piling up. It seems like a cycle that could be readily broken.
Well, and I know that one of the things that we had talked about in preparing for this was the comparison with the Marie Kondo approach, right? If you're not familiar with that, that's the one that's do the things and keep the things that give you joy and get rid of everything else, right? Be ruthless. I don't really need these CIP study guides from 2016 that are sitting over here literally with arm's reach. Um, so I should get rid of them. But whereas the Marie Kondo approach, I think, is more about what's in it for me and us and contemporary. This goes deeper. As Steve said, it's for the children or for the people who are going to succeed us. And I know a couple of people on this call have actually written things along those lines. I think I saw something from Arlette along those lines. It may not have referred to Swedish Death Cleaning, but and I think I saw Lee something from you as well not that long ago along these lines. So we want to start really by kind of talking about the strategic reasons for why you would do this and why you would take this approach. And again, for some of you, I suspect this is going to be kind of old hat, been there, done that. You've already done this. Um, for those of you who have, we'd love to hear your thoughts on how well that's worked, what's been successful, how have you been able to really instill this into your culture as opposed to just talking about it and waiting out you or your consultant. Steve, you want to start us off?
Well, I'll start with a story because I like
Stories are good.
stories. They have the added benefit of being true stories because I don't have a good enough memory to tell false stories and have to remember what I said. So I had a client recently that had me out to help them do this very thing. And it was almost surprising. Certainly, it was surprising to them when they figured out that they were spending a $500,000 a year to store stuff in the mountain. And that was a crazy amount of money, especially since they don't touch that stuff. A lot of it had accumulated because this firm had acquired a bunch of others over the years, and they just took all the stuff and we'll deal with it later. We'll deal with it later. We'll deal with it later. You know, a 500,000 here and a 500,000 there, and suddenly you're talking real money. So they said, "Can you help us figure out a way to get rid of this?" What I found most fascinating was it wasn't so much, can you come go through the boxes and throw stuff out? It was come up with a rule set, a rubric that we can follow so that we can though then go and get some lower cost employees, some temps. They're in LA, so there's a lot of, they're fairly near UCLA. Maybe they can get some interns. There are schools in library science. The idea being take this view of being very mercenary about what you toss, figure out a way to determine what should we keep and let's throw away everything else. And then they had me help to instill a couple of layers of oversight so that mistakes wouldn't be made. Even acknowledging that, okay, there is a risk we'll throw something out, maybe we shouldn't. But we instilled a couple of layers of supervisory, it was California. Um, people looking over people's shoulders who were looking over the interns' shoulders to double check that the rubric was followed correctly. And we used a bunch of colored stickers to determine this is definite, get rid of. That was like a red sticker. This was a green sticker. We definitely have to keep this according to the rules. There was a category of we're not really sure. And then there was a category that said, we think this maybe was just misfiled and we're not quite sure what to do with it. Instant benefit. Instant benefit. Now we talk about cost justifying things. This was fun because it came from them. They're like, we're not a law firm, So all the things that many companies use to determine what are allowed to throw away and what they shouldn't doesn't even apply. So that why are we following the rules according to the legal community? We're not that. So anyway, not to take up all the airtime, I found the whole experience really instructive. And it was an instant win for this company, starting with their own file room. Because we could start with this, and I think most of what's in there, they say, we can just get rid of and dedicate this new empty office space to our box management people who right now are sharing a couple of cubicles outside. So there's another argument of repurposing the real estate. And it
Yeah,
goes on and on.
and that's very expensive downtown LA real
Yeah,
estate.
yeah, yeah.
So before we continue, I want to welcome our esteemed colleague Donda Young. Donda, you want to give yourself a quick introduction
Hey
and then
guys, sorry I'm late. So Donda Young, Helios Consulting. Been doing the independent consulting bit for, I don't know, 3 years now. Long time IGRM professional, insurance space, couple of excuse me, couple of vendors. And now I do my own thing. So, and I love doing this thing with these two hooligans on either side of me. Because A, they're fun and we tend to think a lot alike in some ways, but also enough that's different that we get a broad perspective. And I love the fact that you guys have joined us because it broadens even more of that perspective. So thank you for being here. And again, apologies for being late.
so Donda, when you joined, we had just started talking about the strategic reasons for why we should be tackling cleanups with a vengeance. And I know you had some thoughts on that.
Um, yeah. So part of in tackling whether it's this particular type of, Swedish death cleaning cleanup, or any other type of project is you have to be able to sell yourself and your program and the value that you bring towards the organization that you're working for. You need to develop a really strong business case. And I know some folks tend to struggle with that because we're not naturally salespeople. I'm still learning that, to be honest with you. And I've been doing, the IGRM thing for close to 30 years now. So if you're struggling with developing that business case, usually what I have done in the past is to think about what the opportunities, and I don't like to say necessarily challenges. What are the opportunities for improvement within your organization? You know what some of those pain points are within the business, or go have a conversation with the business, right? Figure out what their pain points are, figure out what you might be able to do, and see if you can't adopt a champion within the business. Start with a pilot and move your Swedish death cleaning initiative forward. In that vein of starting small, this is my mantra, starting small, growing big, because you can't ingest a 20-pound milkshake all at once, right? It's going to take a bit of time. Okay. So think about
You
it
get a
in
brain
small
freeze.
chunks. Yes, you will get a brain freeze.
An
Exactly, Steve.
organizational brain freeze.
Yes, yes. So don't do that to yourself and don't do that to the organization because there's going to be a lot of change management. And that is like the toughest barrier to get through. So start with a small pilot group, see what you can get through. There's always lessons learned when you start something. So really try and focus on um, getting through that pilot, understanding what the pain points were, where your lessons learned are, and then grow from there. That's all I had, Jesse, for that particular point.
Okay, and as we're talking, we'd love for you guys to talk too. What have you seen that's worked? What have you seen that made you fall flat on your face horribly? What gave you that organizational brain freeze? If
Can,
you want to come off mute, you can. If you want to raise your hand, you can do that too. Um,
can I
but we
call
really
on
do want you to hear from you guys.
can I call on Angela? Because she put something in the chat and I gave a half snarky reply, but I think it's worth a moment. Go
Of
ahead and
course.
like,
I
because Molly's on her phone, she might not see the chat. Can you say it
sure.
again?
Yeah, so what did I say here? Let me read it. I said I think one of the challenges that education leading up to that whole Swedish death cleaning thing it, is education to teach them not to just automatically say, "Oh, it's old, throw it out." Throw everything out past that's older than 2000. So I just want to kind of note that because sometimes when people see a large amount of information, whether it's data or that scary room that has 100 boxes in it, that, oh, it's just old, let's just get rid of it.
And I
Like
wrote
thoughtfully,
back, unless,
unless.
and I'll go back to the story I was telling a few minutes ago, because they're in that exact situation.
Mhm.
And part of the rubric ended up being that kind of a criterion. But it wasn't just arbitrary. It had to do with a number of factors that were drawn right from the business. What is the business about? What does it do? So again, I mentioned they're not a law firm. They were and are they're a wealth management firm, and they have lots of legal documents, but they are not the official record keepers. They've been copied on tons of things. That coupled with the fact that tons of this stuff were from clients who aren't even clients anymore and haven't been. We got into the discussion of, do you just get rid of it? Do you have to let them know? And we've heard this certainly. Lee, your amazing facilitation of conversations in the legal community. I know this has come up too. How do you handle that? Do you have a policy? Can you just ditch stuff? Do you have to let the client know first? Some of these things, they dated back to the mid 80s. These clients aren't even still alive. I don't even know who to call. For those reasons, a cutoff date was established. If it's older than, just ditch it. So by and large, just picking an arbitrary date is probably not a good idea if you don't have any sense of what's in there. So yes, I agree with your comment, but that's why I wrote unless. It's
Yeah, and that's a difference because there's one of just of thoughtfully doing it and having a rationale behind that date than just saying it's older than and being able to communicate that.
right. And I've always said the
Yeah,
thinking is the work.
it
Executing on that
is.
thinking. I mean, that's hard and complicated, but the thinking is the work.
It
Well, and,
really
and
is.
sometimes we get that kind of pushback, right? Where it's like, well,
Mhm.
why don't we just get rid of everything over X years old? And of course, this is why, whether it's wealth management, whether it's legal, whether it's just, any other type of industry, sometimes we can do that and sometimes we can't. Um, so speaking of just arbitrarily dealing with stuff, the hot topic of the millennia, of course, is artificial intelligence, which Steve, I think you said is neither artificial nor intelligent. But I'm going to throw this one over to Donda, and I want to get her thoughts on uh, the efficacy of Swedish death cleaning for AI.
Yeah, so uh, I had only a few thoughts around this, and it's more of a reiteration of what we kind of try to push our mantra as information professionals through our organization is data quality. I don't care if it's electronic or hard copy, you still have to tag the stuff, right? So that comes into play when we're talking about AI. Um, when organizations are trying to set up AI within an established, we hope to say an established governance framework, sometimes that's not always the case. But within at least in some semblance of information management framework, it's important to make sure that that information is tagged so that we can find the right stuff, get the right outputs. But when it comes to the outputs of AI, there's still some, I'll say, guesswork as to what is it that we really have to keep, right? Is it the end result from the prompt? Is it the prompt as well? Did we pull from the right resources and the right data sets to be able to get quality outputs? And so everything that we start doing in this AI space really hinders on us, in my mind, because we have to have a voice in this space of making sure things are tagged right, but also getting rid of that junk, right? This Swedish death cleaning premise of keeping what you need, getting rid of what you don't, and then transferring over that stuff that might need to be kept from a legacy perspective. Maybe it's a historical information, an archival record that's very important to your organization. I know when I worked at a disability insurance company for many, many years, I was one of the individuals that was in charge of the archives. It seemed like myself and one of the marketing people. And you know, marketing people, they're very sensitive about their information. They think a lot of things need to be retained for a plethora of reasons, right? Not everything does. And so when working with that group, it was that keep, release, transfer, you know, thought process. And of course, we didn't use those terms at the time because back then I wasn't even aware of Swedish death cleaning until a relative had told me about this thing. And then I talked to these guys like, hey, what if we do this topic? This will be kind of fun. So I would say that from the AI space, look at the same lens of the figure out what needs to be kept. Make sure you've got it's going after the right data, right? It's going after the quality information that you're putting in your information stores. Make sure those information stores are keeping what they need, releasing, getting rid of, deleting, whatever you want to say, of the stuff that's junk, drafts, you know, the rot. And then transferring that information over when it's done. Now, that could be at its end of life. That could be, again, in an archive. That could have to sit somewhere more specifically, depending on what rules and regs that are out there. So I think we as a community have a great opportunity. This is our time right now. We may think that this AI thing is super scary. We don't know enough about it. I don't, have a skin in the game. And I've heard that at many conferences over the last 2 years. Like, I just deal with records. I don't deal with AI or data or wrong. You have this skill set to transfer that over into the space of AI because it's all about the information. That's what it's trying to get at. And rant.
Well, and I'm reminded that when we were talking about this, to the point that you just made, Donda, a lot of the Christmas ornaments that my mother has tried to give me over the years are her memories, not mine, right? I don't need her memories. I have plenty of my own, and mine are fading fast enough that I don't need to try and add more on top of that. I think there's the same idea here in terms of organizations' information, in that some of it we're keeping just in case and just because, and what if we need it, or what if we want to do AI against it? We want to do modeling based on statistical analysis. Well, that's great to a point, but I had a conversation yesterday with somebody about their backups. And fortunately for me, they were doing backups the way I would expect, a couple of weeks, maybe a month, nothing more than that. And yet there are organizations, hopefully none on this call, who have backup tapes dating back years and years and years. And so I ask you, what is the value of a backup of your email server from 10 years ago? And that to me is something that could be Swedish deathly cleaned, without a whole lot of issue. Steve, you had talked about on our prep call, in Donda's words, start small, grow big. How do you do that in the context of this?
Well, I mean,
I know you had a specific thought you wanted to
I did.
expound
I
on.
did. I have many specific thoughts, some of them even relevant.
Well, pick one of those.
Pick one of those. Well, okay. Just to tie it a bit to the comment that you had just made, Jesse, what is the value of having backups of your email going back 10 years? It's even more than just it's ancient email, who cares? The liability that's represented there, even from a privacy perspective, a lot of times when I'm working with organizations from a privacy perspective, they don't even think about their backups. If you get a data subject access request, you got to go through all that stuff too if you're going to do it right.
Potentially.
So there's another reason not to keep it all hanging around. The thought about start small, grow big. If we use that as an example, you are now necessarily also talking to other parts of the organization. It's not merely a quote unquote records thing. So you need to be dealing with, the IT department and whoever else, and maybe there's separate stores over to legal because you've dragged some sort of a shortcut to iManage into your Outlook, or you know for me, that's a great door to open / excuse to leverage to start engaging with the organization writ large. So one of my favorite stories to that effect has to do, it was a large regional bank, and I was working with the records group, and they were really struggling because they needed more repository space, and they didn't have the budget. And the guy happened to be friends with one of the IT directors who was having the same struggle because they needed just more storage for the, quote unquote, the regular part of the company, not just that back order of records. So they were having lunch one day and they realized if they put their budgets together, they could both be happy. So for me, the lesson there was, if you happen to be friends with the IT guy and you're having lunch, it's a question worth asking. But more importantly, how do you become friends and have lunch with a counterpart like in IT in that circumstance? Another example, it was a municipal government, and the woman I was talking to who was on the record side, it's like, you know what? I know who the IT guy is. I need to talk to him. He's just on the other side of our little campus here. You know what? When we hang out, I'm just going to go walk across and knock on his door. Somehow nobody thinks about that. Pick up the phone. You don't have to do everything through email, especially to go walk down the hall.
Get some steps.
Yeah. So even that, start small, grow big. Start small. Go walk down the hall. Go hang out in the cafeteria. Whatever it is.
Right. And again, if any of you have had success in doing this, whether it's Swedish death cleaning style or just kind of getting approval to start mucking out the stalls, feel free to weigh in. I know that some of you are embarked or embarking upon such fraught endeavors, but we'd love to know what you found that has worked and what you found that maybe you wish you had done a different way.
Can I
Don't
call
be
on
shy now.
somebody? Can I call? Because if you've been to these before, you know I tend to do that.
Well, you already called on Angela, so the
I
precedent
know,
has
but
been set.
I know, but we live a continent apart from each other, so I'm not quite so scared.
Jeez.
Susan, if it's okay, because you're still smiling and you're still here, I noticed, as many of you did, a lot of kind of vigorous nodding. Can you share what's going through your head as we talk about this?
Sure. Well, I know some of you on the call. I actually work at a university, and I have to say, this resonates with me because when I first started, and I am a graduate of we call it Dr. Mark Langemo, Harvard of the North, University of North Dakota. And so I really followed along with his teachings where we do a preliminary file purge, get rid of the duplicates, do an inventory, and create your retention schedule. And when you talk about, bang for your buck, um, I I inherited a lot of records that we only needed to keep for 2 years, and they had them going back for 30, 40 years. And so when suddenly I could go through, and I do it now when I work with the department, I come in and I have my retention schedule and I know, okay, where am I really going to make the most difference and get them on board with me? And it's usually with our financial records because we're just a copy holder. And so I go through, say, hey, okay, we can get rid of these. And it took a long time for people to start trusting me. And but it's amazing. I mean, it's a low hanging fruit. But now what I'm trying to do is, we're talking paper back then. Now I'm trying to do the same thing with electronic records. And I'm interested in your thoughts with AI. I like the comment that you made that it's, AI, it's all about the information, which I don't think people really understand. But how are we, we're all talking about ingesting this information so that we can do the data mining through the AI prompts. But then where's the point at which we're going to, it's the life cycle, right? So, I mean, from cradle to grave, where are we going with this then when it comes time for disposition? How do we get that out of date information or maybe inaccurate information out of those data sets? So I don't know if I took you on a different path, but
It's your path. So that's great. No,
but that's my
seriously.
question.
I don't know that we have an answer for that. That's I think going to be one of the great struggles over the next couple of years is how do we play around with data quality in support of AI while still having to think through what we've all been doing for 10, 20, 30, 40 years,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I'm sure there's a way to square that circle. I don't know what it is yet. And I think that's something we'll all be trying to figure out.
I think a lot of it is to just continue to do what you're doing. It's the water torture bit, right? It doesn't hurt at first, but after a while, it's like a
Well, and
mosquito buzzing around your ear. Okay, okay.
right. Well, it's probably also using that as the business case, right? We've long struggled, I think, as a discipline to make an effective business case for getting rid of stuff. And I think AI and privacy before it might be the thing that maybe actually move the needle a little bit. Angela, you have your hand up. Go ahead, ma'am.
Just one of the things that I found to help me, like with getting cleaning projects or classification projects, is to actually look at what projects were happening in the organization that I was working at. Is there any big data projects or applications or transfers and migrations happening? Because being able to kind of like wiggle your way into that helps you get elevation into the organization, and might give you that little project just to tag on to that kind of helps you move into other areas. And I saw that John Daly popped something in the chat that was pretty interesting too. So I'm gonna call out John Daly.
Thanks.
Hi, John.
So yeah, guys, we have like over 100 applications. We have like 50,000 SharePoint sites. There's just literally no way I can manually manage any of this stuff. I don't even know if people are adhering to the records retention schedule because I don't have oversight over that. So, so that being said, I mean, I don't know if we're going to get this or not, but we've been trying for a long time. So Big ID pretty much just scans everything under the sun where I could find the oldest, the biggest, the largest, the orphan, who owned it, all that good stuff, and then the rot. And so I'm really hanging my hat on this in 2026. I would like to bring some structure to the organization and some accountability and co-pilots finding all the information that people had access to that they didn't know they had. And so this really is a pivotal year in our organization.
That's a fun year.
2 words, job security.
Well,
Possibly.
2 other words, one of which I can't say in polite company. All right. So,
Oh, sorry,
Cheryl, I'm
Cheryl,
sorry, you
yeah.
have your hand up. Go ahead, ma'am.
Hi, guys. Hi, everybody. I just want to say that what I've found to be extremely helpful in this regard and kind of mirrors along with what Angela was saying about knowing, what migrations or transformations are happening. You should have regular lunch with your CISO. Like the CISO is the role that has money and really knows the pain points of what's going on. And if there's another thing that I have found that works really well. If there are efforts within the organization to have contests for saving money and things like that, I would glob onto them. I've been able to win awards for those types of efforts by saving, 20% of what we spent on storage, either electronic or physical, goes a long way. So those are a couple of things that I've seen work really well.
For those of you not following along in the chat, John said that he's going to gain 25 pounds by having lunch with all these people. But John, you're going to be walking it all off as you walk down to their office or across the campus.
That's right. Get your steps in.
And Angela
or go sailing with them, whatever it takes,
Oh, I don't know what
captive
kind of people
audience.
you hang out with. And Angela said cyber is hot right now and is part of a lot of AI projects, and that might be an in. Donda said that she is a big fan of Big ID if you have all the right modules to do the right things to reduce the inventory and without slagging Big ID. And I'm sure that's not your intent, Donda, but would you care to elaborate a bit?
Yeah, sure. So I had the opportunity of evaluating Big ID for one of my insurance clients. And what I found was I actually liked what they were doing. It can be a slick tool, but as with anything in any piece of software, you have to have all the right modules to be able to do what you want to do. This particular client had, it had some of the, I'll say some of the review capabilities for Big ID, crawling out and looking at your data, telling you what it is. But you have to have that compliance retention module. And that's what was missing for this particular client. And, at the time they weren't ready to purchase anymore because it was an evaluation of multiple different types of software, and Purview was one of them. And, they do well at the DLP, as does Big ID, but with any software, regardless of what it is, I agree. Having lunch with CISO, cyber, having the conversations with them is, what do we have for tools? Get an understanding of what you have for tools, and then see if there are add-on modules that will help with that rot reduction, that will help with the retention management type of activities to get rid of this stuff. Because sometimes they have them. They may not all work in the best light based off of our specific profession, we're used to retention management tools and records management tools that really, they do a decent job. Sometimes these other tools that have the add-on modules haven't always been thought through with a records manager sitting there talking with the development team. So that too is an opportunity for us to have those conversations. I know when I was at an insurance company, and this was early on, reviewing one of the big records management software, and I won't say their name, but they were one thing and they, have merged a couple of times, but our team was very involved in providing product use feedback to the team. And then they actually made the changes. And for me, that was super cool. So for example, this particular software said that they had legal hold capability, right? Okay. It put things on hold, but how do you know? How could you tell visually that something was on hold? You couldn't at the time. So our simple suggestion was, can you put a red hand next to all the items that are on hold? And guess what? A few months later, I'm putting my hand down, by the way, on Zoom. A few months in their next cycle or their second cycle in development, that thing was implemented. So don't forget your value when you're talking to the vendors and evaluating software, that you can absolutely have intricate feedback that they may be willing to adopt and put into their software so that they can get other clients to adopt the software. It's all about selling, right? And if we as information management professionals help with those folks, because developers don't necessarily sit in our space, right? They rely upon feedback from their sales team, marketing teams, sometimes I'll say the internal consultants working with clients, but it's really up to us as clients to be able to provide that feedback and not give up. Be diligent. A dog without a bone, seek it. Go find it and push it through, because sometimes those changes can make a huge difference for you, but it also can make a difference for the community.
Master Weissman.
I was gonna say pile on. That's not right, because that's a negative thing. That's a negative thing. I'm going to agree violently. And actually, it's really kind of cool. Donda, you raised a different perspective I hadn't really fully thought about in the context of Swedish Death Cleaning. And that is the vendor tool side, software and services, including, I'm a consultant, so I urge you to take the same approach with consultants.
Mm-hmm.
So even before you get to pushing your vendor to make changes that you need that will then also benefit them, I mean, that's a clear value thing both for you and for them. And if they're not willing, find somebody else maybe. But, and in some ways it ties back to the thinking is the work. When it comes time to evaluating even which vendor you want to go with, take the same aggressive, and I say aggressive even, not just assertive approach, because they're working for you.
Mm-hmm.
So I have this other bumper sticker that I've never made. I have a whole wall full of them that I've never made. This one says, don't take yes for an answer. Do you do legal hold? Can you support automate the retention schedule? Can you? And they all say yes. don't take yes for an answer. The next thing you have to ask is, yes, how? Tell me how. Because yeah, it's configurable. But what does that mean? I can do it myself by checking a box, or you got to send a team full of engineers into my office for 6 months, and I get to pay for that too.
Right.
The differences can be enormous, and that starts with that whole process with the thinking is the work. Another bumper sticker. Be clear in your own minds so that you can transfer it to them. What's the business problem you're trying to solve? Now, I say that as a singular, the problem. There are many problems and they overlap. And so it's not always as simple as just making a list of 5 things and we'll start with this one. But if you can't articulate for yourself and for your managers and the controllers of the budget, and thus for the vendor, what it is you're trying to do, what does it look like when it's done? You're going to leave value on the table at best and have a horrible experience at worst. That, that is, for me, it all starts from there. What is the problem you're trying to solve? That's the t-shirt, right? The rest is just details. So even when it comes to writing an RFP, my recommendation is always tell them what you're trying to accomplish and then ask them, how are you going to help me do this? Don't tell them, certain round numbers, you have to, but I've seen so many cases of, I need a scanner that can handle this volume or run at that speed, and like as not, that's what they're going to sell you. And I'm not saying that that's wrong, but there's a broader context there that you have to communicate if you really want to find a partner that can get you to where you want to go. So that's my own / end of rant.
So I want to kind of bring this back to the initial starting point, which was Swedish Death Cleaning, and really that being an approach to doing cleanups of digital landfills, let us say. But I think that you just hit on something, Steve, and we're seeing a lot of these similar comments about the tech evaluation, if you will, in the chat. So if you're not looking at the chat, I encourage that. But in the case of the wealth management firm, there was a business problem, right? They were tired of spending all that money on offsite storage for stuff that they strongly suspected they didn't need to keep. And so all of the discussions really should funnel back into how do I cut the costs of keeping garbage, essentially, right? And I think for the other examples that you and Donda and others on the call have shared, I think a lot of it boils down to that same question. And so if we go back to the start of the call and we say that Swedish Death Cleaning is about getting rid of stuff that you know you don't need so that other people don't have to do it later, I think that applies to all of this. Whatever the technology is and whatever the actual business problem is, there's a chunk of it that we can just move out of our lives and out of our organizations because it has no value, it brings us no joy, and we don't want our successors to have to deal with it. Right? I know on other calls like this, we've talked about leaving the organization better than you found it. And I think we can even extrapolate that per Donda and Angela's thread in the chat to leaving the industry better than we found it. And so maybe if we can figure out a way to really put some meat around what this could look like for different kinds of organizations, that might be a conversation that would be helpful for many of us.
I like that thought, Jesse. Not just for the broader community, but by industry type. Certainly, would be I think a huge value for a lot of folks that are trying to push through a lot of their various different initiatives. I think the why reinvent the wheel message, I don't. Talk to your industry folks that are in the same industry. And if you don't know any, find some. you know, be a part of AIM, be a part of ARMA. As as I've said recently to a mentee, follow who they follow on social media and then pick their brains, right? Um, it's really important that your network is not only within your industry but outside it, because sometimes folks outside of that industry that you're in, and I know I'll use Angela for example, she's in the public sector, right, in Canada. But I know for a fact that Angela taps into other people outside of that industry to get different perspectives because they may be doing something that would fast track an initiative that she's doing because it's just a different enough slant that she can sell it and move it forward.
And all that tapping explains why the Mounties are outside your house so often. It had to be said.
No, it's not.
I'm not sure it did. So we're coming to the top of the hour, and I want to make sure to have a couple of minutes for final thoughts from our August conversationalists here. But I did want to note that what we're planning for next month is kind of picking up from where we leave off here. We've done the Swedish death cleaning, right? We've gotten rid of the stuff that is the easiest, lowest hanging fruit to get rid of because we don't want to leave it for our organizations. What do you do with what's left, especially the paper? And so I don't think we have a snazzy title yet, but we're going to be talking, I think, about how to approach what to do with what's left. So with that, Steve, I'm going to turn it over to you for your final thoughts.
I hope you mean final in terms of this call and not just in general, because maybe you know something
I would
don't
never
know.
wish that on another
I
person,
know, I
especially
appreciate
somebody
that.
as nice as you. But yes, for this call, please.
I've done a pretty good job of beating the horse of the thinking is the work and what business problem you're trying to solve. In the context of the Swedish death cleaning, um, I think that extends into the future. I mean, I often say it or live it at the start of various client engagements, but with the long-term view in mind, I think it's a great lever to press in terms of pushing this particular rock up the entire organizational hill. How's that for mixing metaphors? So, we talked about cost reduction, obvious, the fruit of $500,000 a year storing boxes. But as this continues, whether it's for AI, it's for things like, oh, we have to migrate to the cloud. I mean, we know that this is a catalyst for good governance, but there's a legacy here too, in that, hey, bosses or whomever, we do this once and we're set for the foreseeable future and maybe beyond. And there's a value to that in terms of future hiring or restructuring of an organization or process improvement or what have you. Like in sports or anything else, focusing on these fundamentals pays dividends long term. And so I guess my takeaway here, or my exhortation is, as Donda says, start small, grow big, but well, it's the old environmental thing, right? Start locally, think globally. Think tactically, but also strategically, because it's really nothing different. It's an extension of, and it helps keep all the pieces aligned if you've got your sights set on the objective instead of just on the step right in front of you. All right, that's enough metaphor mixing. My brain hurts.
All right, and Donda, you get the final word of this
Oof.
session.
Okay, well, I will start by addressing a question that Angela had, or a want that Angela posted in the chat is, can we get a transcript of this? We will try, certainly, and we will share it. But one thing that I have been working on over the last week is also a little tip sheet that kind of lends to the Swedish death cleaning thing. We all know rot. And it'll have some slants around that too, but just something a little fun that maybe you all can share within your organization. That's part of what Steve, Jesse, and I like to do is not only bring the community together and have the conversation, but not every webinar that we do, but on some of the webinars, we do like to give little job aids and little tip sheets, that kind of thing. So we will be developing that and we will be sharing that out as soon as it's available. And these guys have edited me to the, thousandth degree. So I can be a little wordy. So anyway, I thank you all for joining this session and contributing to this session. Any post questions, comments, feel free to reach out to us on LinkedIn or our various websites. And then, I would say parting words. Do what you can and don't sweat what you can't, because it's the stress isn't worth it. And I know we all care about what we're doing, but we can only do so much, and it really takes a village to be able to do this. So thank you all very much. We greatly appreciate you being here, and check YouTube. We'll have this posted in the next couple of weeks.
Yep.
And thanks everybody for coming. Thank you, Donda. Thank you, Steve. And hopefully we'll see you guys next month for the next information governance community conversation, community roundtable. Excuse me.
We aim for the third Wednesday of every month, unless
Yes.
it's conference week or something.
So
Thank
thanks
you.
everybody. Have a great
See you
rest
Bye,
of your week.
guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye, everybody.